Death often comes with little warning, be it accidents, heart attacks, or senseless acts of violence. But here are 5 deaths that were especially unexpected, with most making front-page headlines. Jill Dando. On the morning of the 26th of April 1999, popular television presenter Jill Dando returned to her Fulham home after spending the night with her fiancé Alan Farthing. Jill drove her car and parked outside her house, and as she went to put the key in the door, she was grabbed from behind, forced to the ground, and a single shot was fired through her left temple, killing her instantly. The bullet entered her head just above her ear and came out the other side, giving her no chance of survival. 14 minutes later, her body was discovered by a neighbour and she was taken to Charing Cross Hospital, where she was declared dead on arrival. Jill was shot with a 9mm caliber automatic pistol. Witnesses said shortly before the gunshot they heard a surprised cry from Jill, as if she had unexpectedly seen someone she knew. Also, a tall white man aged around 40 was seen walking away from Jill's house. The murder received intense media coverage, as at the time of her death, Jill was one of the highest profile BBC on-screen personalities. She presented the news, holiday programmes and was the main presenter on Crime Watch, even being awarded BBC Personality of the Year in 1997. There appeared to be no motive for the killing, and after a year of investigating, the police had no breakthroughs, but were concentrating their inquiries on local man Barry George. He had a history of antisocial behaviour and stalking. After being put under surveillance, George was finally arrested and charged with Jill's murder, and despite flimsy evidence, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. The public were delighted that Jill's murderer had been found, but there was concern about the conviction, and George always maintained his innocence. After several appeals, George was finally acquitted of any involvement in Jill's death. Since then, many lines of inquiry have been explored. Some have suggested she was killed by a hired assassin, others have suggested mistaken identity or a deranged fan, but none of these have been proved and the case was never reopened, leaving it to this day an unsolved and very unexpected murder that shook the UK. River Phoenix. River Phoenix was born on August 23, 1970. He was the eldest of 5 children. His parents were unconventional and hippie-ish and were part of a religious movement called the Children of God. They were often short of money, and from an early age, River would play his guitar on street corners to earn a few dollars for the family. Phoenix never attended school, and although he could read and write, he was totally uneducated in all other academic subjects. River and his siblings were spotted by a top kids agent while singing for spare change in Los Angeles. After this, he was cast in several short films and adverts, and his career really took off when he became a household name at the age of 15 in the coming-of-age film Stand By Me. Phoenix went on to star in several other high-profile films and was nominated for an Academy Award for his Best Supporting Actor for his role in Running on Empty, and won critical acclaim for his role alongside Keanu Reeves in the film My Own Private Idaho. But Phoenix's real love was music, and his band Alika's Attic often performed solely for the benefit of environmental and humanitarian organizations. As a lifelong vegan, Phoenix was also a dedicated animal rights activist, and he also spoke out against drug use and its destructive effects. On the evening of the 30th of October 1993, Phoenix was due to perform at the Viper Room in Hollywood with his close friend Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He was accompanied by his girlfriend Samantha Mathis, his sister Rain and his brother Joaquin. During the early hours of October the 31st, Phoenix collapsed outside the Viper Room and convulsed on the pavement for over 5 minutes. By the time paramedics arrived, he had turned dark blue, he was in full cardiac arrest, and despite attempts to resuscitate him, was pronounced dead at 1:51 a.m. at the age of just 23. The following day, the club, part owned by Johnny Depp, became a makeshift shrine, with fans and mourners leaving candles, pictures and flowers. The club remained closed for a week, and Johnny Depp continued to close every year on October the 31st as a mark of respect for his friend Phoenix. The shock death of River Phoenix from a drug overdose caused by a cocaine and heroin mix was in contrast to the squeaky clean image of Phoenix that was portrayed in the media, as a dedicated vegan and humanitarian activist with strong views on social and dietary issues. Phoenix was cremated and his ashes were scattered at the family ranch in Mycanopy, Florida. The official cause of death was acute multiple drug intoxication. Following his death, his family issued a statement denying he was a habitual drug user. Michael Faherty. Now, although Michael Faherty is not anyone well known, his death was incredibly unexpected. Michael was a 76-year-old pensioner who lived alone at Clairview Park, Ballybane, Ireland. 3 days before Christmas in 2010, his body was found face up in his front room. His head was near the fireplace and his body was badly burned, but there were no other signs of a fire. The only other areas that were damaged were the floor directly below the body and the ceiling directly above. Investigators were baffled as to the cause of death, as there were no obvious signs of foul play. Forensic experts concluded that the fireplace was not the cause of the fire that killed Michael. No accelerant had been found, and in an attempt to find an explanation, experts had to consult medical textbooks and research other areas to find an answer. An inquest into Michael's death decided, after a thorough investigation, the only possible cause of death was spontaneous human combustion. Spontaneous human combustion is a term used when a living or recently deceased human body ignites without any apparent external source of ignition. The fire is believed to start within the body of the victim. Over a period of 300 years, there have apparently been over 200 deaths attributed to this bizarre event. In most cases, there are a few common factors in the recorded deaths. The victims are usually chronic alcoholics, usually elderly females. The victim's hands and feet usually fall off, and there is little damage to anything surrounding the body. And when the body is discovered, the greasy residue of the burnt body usually has a putrid smell. Whatever the explanation, the thought of a person suddenly bursting into flames and burning to death is certainly a terrifying thought, and was incredibly unexpected for Michael and his family. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is easily the most iconic man in martial arts history. He paved the way for the art, so when he unexpectedly passed away, the world was in total shock. It all started on May the 10th, 1973, when Bruce Lee suffered a seizure during an audio dialogue replacement session for his new movie Enter the Dragon. He was immediately rushed to Hong Kong Baptist Hospital, with doctors diagnosed as cerebral edema. He was given a drug called mannitol to reduce the swelling and ease the severe head pain he was experiencing. After his discharge from hospital, Lee continued his hectic schedule, promoting his new film and having discussions about his next project, Game of Death. 2 months after his seizure, on July the 20th, he was in Los Angeles to have a meeting and dinner with James Bond star George Lazenby. Prior to the meeting, Lee was discussing the making of Game of Death with his producer Raymond Chow, and at around 4 p.m, the pair drove to actress Betty Ting Pei's house to go over the script with her. Shortly after, Chow left, leaving Lee and Betty in the house. All of a sudden, Lee started to complain of a headache, so Betty gave him the painkiller Equagesic and he went to lie down. When he did not turn up for his dinner meeting with Lazenby, Chow returned to Betty's house, and when he was unable to wake Lee up, he panicked and called a doctor. The doctor arrived and spent 10 minutes trying to revive him before calling an ambulance to take him to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but Lee was pronounced dead on arrival. Bruce Lee was just 32 years old. He left a wife and 2 children and did not live to see the release of Enter the Dragon, one of the most successful martial arts movies of all time. The autopsy report confirmed Bruce's brain had swollen considerably, and he had the painkiller Equagesic in his system. Lee's death was first ruled as death by misadventure. A funeral ceremony was held in Hong Kong and was attended by 25,000 people. Bruce wore the Chinese outfit he had worn in Enter the Dragon, and later a smaller ceremony was held in Seattle, USA, where he was buried at Lot 276 Lakeview Cemetery. After his death, controversy surrounded the actual cause of his untimely demise. Theories ranged from murder by triads to Lee's overuse of electrical muscle simulation and his use of cannabis. But after top forensic scientist Donald Tier was assigned to the case, he concluded that Lee had died from an acute cerebral edema caused by a reaction to the painkiller he had been given. Bruce Lee's legacy continues to live on, and his influence on martial arts will never be forgotten. Princess Diana. Many people remember exactly what they were doing on Sunday the 31st of August 1997, the day that shocked the world and caused an outpouring of grief worldwide that has never been seen before. It was the day that Diana, Princess of Wales, was killed in a car crash in a Paris underpass whilst being chased by the paparazzi. Diana and her new lover, Dodi Al Fayed, had stopped in Paris, intending to stay the night at the Ritz before heading back to London. But at the last minute, they changed their minds and instead decided to head to an apartment owned by Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed. A hired black 1994 Mercedes was waiting at the back entrance of the Ritz. Dodi and Diana sat in the back, and the driver Henry Paul and security officer Trevor Rees-Jones were in the front. They sped off at high speed at around 12:20 a.m. with the paparazzi in pursuit. As the car entered the Pol de Lama underpass, Henry Paul lost control of the car, swerved to the left and collided head-on with the 13th pillar at an estimated speed of 65 miles per hour. The impact was devastating. Dodi and Henry Paul were killed instantly, and Diana and Trevor Rees-Jones were seriously injured. Diana reportedly had no visible injuries and was conscious, but after being removed from the car, she suffered a cardiac arrest. She was temporarily resuscitated, but her internal injuries were so severe that despite further attempts to resuscitate her, including internal cardiac massage, medics were unable to save her. Diana, Dodi and Henry Paul were not wearing seatbelts, and the only survivor, Trevor Rees-Jones, was. Diana's funeral was held at Westminster Abbey in London, and an estimated 3 million mourners lined the streets. The worldwide coverage was watched by 2.5 billion people, aired in 200 countries and translated in 44 languages, and more than 1 million bouquets were left outside her home at Kensington Palace. After the ceremony, Diana's body was driven through the streets of London, making its way to her final resting place. The hearse was completely covered in flowers thrown onto the car by the watching public. Such was the outpouring of grief that during the 4 weeks following Diana's funeral, the suicide rate in England and Wales rose by 17%, and the case of self-harm was up 44%. In the years that followed Diana's accident, many controversial theories about the cause of her death have been explored, although the official cause of death was unlawful killing caused by the driver Paul Henry's grossly negligent driving. It was also reported that he was driving under the influence of alcohol and prescription drugs. Whatever the true cause, the sad fact is that Diana's death left 2 little boys without their mother and the world without the princess they all loved. This video shows how precious life is and how quickly it can be taken away from us. Tomorrow is never promised, so live life to the full and know that you can become anything you set your mind to. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video and thanks for watching.